America depends on our children. The only way to ensure the future of the United States of America is to ensure the security of our kids' health. About 1/3 of the people in the United States are overweight. One way of solving this growing problem is to encourage kids to eat healthy, nutritious foods and help their learning skills increase. Schools are the perfect candidates. With over 32 million children participating in the school lunch programs nationwide, the programs have to fit the needs of children and the schools.
So the school lunch program is a federally funded program that makes lunches available to students all over the country on a daily basis. And it actually started in the 1940s, so we've had it for a very long time. But the standards for it were recently updated just this past year.
Why? Well, how did it start in the 1940s? What was the reason?
People had identified that actually our children were growing up and were relatively malnourished, and there were concerns about national security. And so during the Truman administration, actually, they decided we needed to do something to make sure that we were ensuring that our children were actually healthy and able to serve if needed. And as a result, they started the lunch program so they knew that children would have at least one solid, sound meal every day.
The requirements for the middle school, we have to have our 2 ounces of protein. We have to have at least 1 whole grain, but we need at least 8 whole grains for the week. So most days we have 2 when we can fit them in for calories. We have to have a minimum of 3/4 cups vegetables per day, but per week we have to have at least 3/4 cup orange and red vegetables, at least a 1/2 cup dark green vegetables, at least a 1/2 cup of legumes, which is baked beans, refried beans, things like that. We have to have a 1/2 cup of starchy vegetables and at least a 1/2 cup of other vegetables. So our requirements are 3 3/4 cups vegetables per week. I generally have, like this week I'm looking at is 5.375 for our total vegetables that are offered. That doesn't mean kids are taking everything, but that's what's offered. And it's a requirement this year that students take at least a 1/2 cup of fruit or vegetable. And that isn't our school requirement, that's a federal requirement. That when they get to the computer and go through, if it's considered a reimbursable meal, they have to have at least they have to have at least 3 full portions on their plate, and one has to be at least a 1/2 cup of fruit or vegetables.
Well, the current program works. The federal government reimburses schools collectively across the country through state agencies to the tune of about $16 billion, that's billion with a B, over the course of the year. And there are 3 categories of payment for school meals. There is what's called the fully paid meal, a reduced price meal, and a free meal. And these income levels are based on the federal poverty level. So if a family earns less than 130% of the federal poverty level, that child receives a free meal. And typically the federal government reimburses, for example, for lunch, about $2.75 for each of those meals.
How much does a meal on average cost?
Well, in general, we find that the meal can be, that schools can provide a healthy meal that meets all the dietary guidelines within the framework of that reimbursement.
Okay.
So that actually helps schools. Schools find if they can increase the number of children that are receiving free or reduced price meals, that helps the school operate its meals program.
And how much do the parents pay or the students pay for lunch on average?
Well, it depends. I've got a sheet here that I need to check, but we reimburse even a so-called paid meal. The federal government reimburses about 28 or 29 cents per meal, and schools should be charging over time what that meal actually costs them to produce. We find that one of the provisions in the federal law that was just passed, overtime requires schools to require or to actually ask parents to pay for an amount that much more closely reflects the actual cost of the meal minus the subsidy that the federal government provides even to those meals.
Are they restricting too much? The schools may want to fit some extras into the meal, but the calorie count may be too high. The meals may not be large enough to support sports players or high metabolism kids. The program may have good intentions, but at the same time it may be inconvenient for kids that need more calories. Also, the program costs $11 billion. The government is already heavily in debt, $17 trillion to be exact, and if we already owe that much, then why should we be spending the money on this? The reason is because the programs really help a lot of people and can make families' life easier. Even though we don't really have the money, we still need these programs.